Well, howdy, howdy ho there, Scream Freaks, and welcome back to an all-new episode of Graphic Violence, where we fill you in on what your favorite movie monster's been up to in the funny books. We finally make a play date with one of the bigger supernatural slashers of the last 30 years and dig our Chucky comics out of the toy box. In the early 90s, a now-defunct comic company called Innovation was making comics out of popular TV shows and movies for a guaranteed buck, and was lucky enough to snag the license to A Nightmare on Elm Street and Child's Play. Hot in the heels of Child's Play 2, Innovation initially released a 3-part adaptation of Chucky's first sequel, then followed right behind that with a 5-issue miniseries that was near perfect right out the gate for fans. It immediately picks up with Chuck being reincarnated right off the assembly line after being blown up at the end of part 2, and he hits the ground running. Not intended for children, this first series takes us on 4 new adventures that truly deliver all the cheesy puns, bloodshed, and swearing you want and expect from your favorite hunk of deadly plastic. The biggest story of the series is issue 2 and 3, with Chucky tying up loose ends from the first movie, seeking revenge on Andy Barclay's mom, Karen, and Detective Norris for stopping him from being a real boy. Turns out Karen was locked away in a rubber room after telling everyone a Psycho Strangler spirit was still killing people while trapped in a My Buddy knockoff, and Norris's partner looked the other way so they wouldn't join her. With Chucky now after, Norris rushes to save her again, but not before he's blown into Swiss cheese by yours truly. This forces Karen to make a daring escape with casualties along the way, ending with the one-liner death blow to Chuck. But our good guy gets the last laugh, however, when she realizes what a dumb bitch she is for losing her only proof that would have made her a free woman. Aside from their grudge match, the rest of the series expands in Chucky's universe beyond the movies with a murder spree that introduces us to new places and faces. Well, for at least 2 out of the other 3 issues. Issue 4 was a real toss-away, with the whole story being Chucky fighting popular toy parodies and a dream he has while healing from Karen's attack. We only got 5 issues here to enjoy, so they should really make it count instead of printing this fantasy bullshit. I mean, it's funny for a panel or a page, but the fans want continuity and stories with real impact. But I'd say Innovation made up for issue 4 with all the involvement and cool opportunities offered to Child Play fans. The first issue is about fictional fans of Chucky trying to help him with a seance, ask his voodoo mentor, Dr. Death, for getting him a new body. Of course, Dr. Death ain't too happy since Chuck was the one who killed him, and it's too late to warn the clueless Helpy Helpertons before Chuck shows his appreciation. At the end of the issue, there's a special ad for issue 5, which was really cool. Innovation held a contest called Stuck on Chuck, and the winner of this random drawing got a molded Chucky inside a Good Guy box that was a prop in part 2, a Child's Play 2 comic signed by the filmmakers, and holy shit, a starring role as a character in the final issue of the miniseries. 2 lucky winners who were required to be older than 21 got to be drawn battling Chucky in a horror movie spoof of Universal Studios theme park, one of them getting killed off while the other saves the little girl from Chucky's tiny grasp before the little guy is taken down to the count in the faux Jaws attraction. How fucking sweet is that? As soon as the series was over, Innovation published their final Child's Play issues with a 3-part comic of Child's Play 3, which is also the last adaptation of any Chucky movie to date. You know, I never understood why companies even bother making comics directly based on movies. I mean, why do I want a comic when there's a fucking movie with all the bells and whistles? I know you can get a little deeper in a character's head with picture literature, or you can see how differently a scene might have played out when there's no such thing as budget constraints. But seriously, comics should only be a means to give us new adventures and new stories above and beyond the movies. Well, luckily, we only had new adventures to look forward to for Chucky's remaining stint in comics. Devil's Due Publishing revived the Tiny Terror in 2007 with a crossover between him and the hit comic Hack Slash. Hands down, Chucky's best-looking comics. He's written true to character as a mean-spirited, foul-mouthed homicidal maniac. Casey Hack and her partner Vlad are a pair of hard-hitting splatter heroes who fight monsters and psychopath slashers, and one of their enemies patches Chucky back together for his voodoo secrets on soul swapping using his amulet dug up from Bride of Chucky. Pissed he's been taken advantage of and wanting payback, Chucky forces Hack to team up with him in order to help her partner, who the villain switched souls with. But once everyone's saved and common enemies are taken out, fans of both characters get what they want with a 4-page wet t-shirt brawl in the swamp that ends like Peter Pan with Chuck swallowed whole by a gator. Of course, you can't keep a good guy down, and Chuck guts his way out a few pages later, ready to start his second miniseries published by Devil's Due. Now, this following 5-issue run was okay at best and was really out there. Chucky makes it back to Chicago, kills some teens, reads a paper, and is reminded of the survivors of Bride of Chucky. Now, it makes sense he goes after Jesse and Jade, the couple he held hostage most of the movie, but not before going out of his way to kill Lieutenant Preston, who's kind of a baffling target for Chuck. I mean, this guy showed up at the end of Bride of Chucky and just stood there, basically. How did Chucky even know who he was before dying? But regardless, Chucky pegs him as someone responsible for keeping him from winning in that movie and puts his whole family in an internal timeout. When Chuck finally goes after our forgettable couple, he gets all plot-heavy on us with a plan to frame them for murders left and right so he can see them suffer. Much to his surprise, however, Jay's paranoia of his return got the better of her this whole time, and she was surprisingly prepared with armored vehicles, flamethrowers, chainsaws, grenades, and a panic room that cooks our friends at the bitter end. His tease his soul rises in the bellowing smoke of his defeat, inhabiting alternative good guy dolls down the road in the dump. But please, no more of this lunacy! Seriously, this story just ran away with itself. Forget exploring more of Chucky's past or even developing his fucking character. Let's just give him the most hackneyed revenge story and throw in some surprises readers would dare call unrealistic, and a story about a fucking doll magically fused with a serial killer's soul. Chucky's last comic appearance was another 2009 miniseries from Devil's Due, and was doomed from the first issue. Borrowing the plot from Halloween Resurrection this time, some guy creates a live reality game show for the web, betting a bunch of teens they can't stay one night in the abandoned Good Guy factory where Chuck's spirit is rumored to still haunt the halls. Blah blah blah, pages of bad art and characters we don't give two fucks about, and a final splash page kill by Chuck who's dumped in there after being captured by a silly looking Australian hunter. Now whether it's because of money or publishing rights or just the fact this was the worst Chucky comic, the series was cancelled as soon as it started and may have been for the better in my opinion. As much as I don't want to see a good character dragged through such shitty treatment, however, I'm still sad his last outing in comics had to be an incomplete story. Now, if you're like me, you like it when horror comics acknowledge their source material storylines and everything works from the same continuity. From Innovation to Devil's Due, Chuck's comics do faithfully stick to the movies and can easily be placed on the timeline. The first Child's Play miniseries occurs between the second and third movie, and the rest from Devil's Due happens between Seed and Curse. Now, previous characters are brought up from time to time, but their continuing stories never conflict with the films, and Chucky's reincarnations are never an issue. Well, no, I take that back, except for maybe the first miniseries in Part 3. Chucky is instantly reborn in the factory at the end of Part 2 from the miniseries, while the third movie starts with 8-9 years passing before he comes back from that same death in the factory with his blood mixing with a new batch of dolls. Now, you could argue he bled all over the factory at the end of Part 2, and even a drop was enough to be brought back in the nick of time before the factory shut down. Then his fate as mechanical fish food could have sent him into limbo until more of his blood is accidentally mixed with new batches of good guy dolls in Part 3. So, you see, you make enough clever excuses, it all comes together. So from comic adaptations to original stories, the Child's Play comics are a satisfying read if you ever decide to hunt them down. I'd highly recommend the Innovation books and the Hack/Crossover for their great art and phenomenal stories, but would only suggest the lesser gratifying Devil's Due books if you're a die-hard fan who would almost buy it just for the title alone. Well, see you later, Screen Freaks! Well, howdy there, Scream Freaks! Well, thank you kindly for watching, and help yourself to more servings of Screaming Sue by visiting our site at screamingsue.com. You can read our weekly updates, character bios, and interviews, catch up on past episodes, browse our store, and drool over the Howlin' Hottie of the Week. If you want to scream at us, just holler at screamingsoup@gmail.com, and don't forget to stalk us through social media, conveniently linked at the top of the site.